We're also getting some brand new information on Vice President Kamala Harris, that she is now scheduled to hold a call with major Democratic donors in about 35 minutes, 3 o'clock today, and that she's doing it at the request of the Biden campaign. NBC's Yamiche Alcindor is reporting from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Also with us, Michael Hardaway, former staffer to Congressman Hakeem Jeffries and Senator Dick Durbin, and Democratic strategist and senior advisor to the Lincoln Project, Joe Trippi, who has worked on campaigns for Howard Dean, Jerry Brown, and Doug Jones. All right, Yamiche, what can you tell us about this call?
Well, Vice President Kamala Harris is finding herself in this position where she's both publicly and privately supporting the president while being ready to take over the ticket should he step down. And part of what she's doing for the Biden campaign is now reaching out to donors today in the 3 p.m. call. She was asked, campaign sources tell us and the team here at NBC News, that she was asked specifically by the president's senior advisors to do this call. I want to read part of an invitation to that donor call. Take a listen to what I'm going to read. It says, "We continue to find ourselves in a rapidly evolving environment," the invitation says. "With the stakes as high as they are this cycle, we have to remain focused on the critical work that needs to be done to protect our democracy. To that end, we are hosting a 30-minute briefing today at 3 p.m. to discuss urgent emerging needs. We will be joined by Vice President Kamala Harris. We will also hear from leaders working on the front lines with voters." And I have to tell you, Chris, this is really coming at a time where donations to the Biden-Harris campaign have really dried up. I've been talking to some grassroots groups who say that they really are terrified in this moment because they have voter outreach efforts that usually get millions and millions of dollars at this time that aren't getting any money. One source even told me that there's a group in Ohio that's thinking about shutting down its operations for voter registration because they're worried that the money just isn't going to be there. So this call really shows that the vice president is continuing to step in, continuing to try to bolster this ticket, while also, of course, still navigating whether or not she's going to actually be at the top of the ticket.
All right, I have to go to you, Joe Trippi, with that latest bit of reporting, because we know our reporting has shown that the Democrats were already talking about, the campaign was already talking about taking in about 50% of what they thought in July. Now that's down to 25%. But there are a lot of supporters of Joe Biden who believe that will come back if it gets settled that he's staying in the race. It's not like they're going to go over to Donald Trump. How worrying do you find the money question right now?
No, the money question, no doubt about it, is very worrying. But I agree with those that say, look, if Joe Biden definitively declares he's in the race to stay at the end of the weekend or whenever he makes his decision, I know there's a lot of talk about him sitting with his family right now. But if he makes that decision, it's the indecision, it's the uncertainty that you saw in those interviews just now with those women in Pennsylvania. It's the uncertainty, I think, that is the problem. I think if it's Joe Biden, the Democrats put their oar in the water and fight. If it's Kamala Harris or someone else, they'll put their oar in the water and fight. And frankly, because the polls just haven't changed that much. Joe Biden still is in position. Yes, it's gotten worse in the last couple of weeks, but he's still in position to win this if it's over soon, this discussion. And and when that happens, I think Democrats will unify one way or the other.
Okay, Yamiche, you also spoke to a member of the Congressional Black Caucus about the ongoing concerns about this candidacy. What did they tell you?
Well, of course, the Congressional Black Caucus really is seen as a key group that's allied with President Biden. They have really been a front line for him as people question whether or not he should step down. But there's really, those members are starting to grow weary. I talked to Emanuel Cleaver. He's a longtime Democratic congressman from Missouri. I want to read to you part of what he told me. He's still supporting President Biden, but he said this to me: "I do think there are efforts afoot to facilitate some kind of transition in the campaign. There are people who are trying to make sure that in the event, not the eventuality, but in the event that the president chooses another path other than running for re-election, that a plan will be in place to make up lost ground." He also said we need to have a plan to shut up and not talk about the debate and just deal with winning with President Biden or with whoever comes next. So that's really interesting language from him, because he's saying that he's backing President Biden, but he's also saying this has to come to an end. All these questions swirling have to come to an end. And I also want to point out, for a few days now, we've been saying, no member of the Congressional Black Caucus has come out to ask President Biden to step aside. Well, that changed today, which is a really big deal. Mark Vesey, who is a Texas congressman, came out, first Congressional Black Caucus member to say President Biden should step aside. You don't know if there are going to be other cracks there. I've been told, talking to sources, there are scratches in that support among the Congressional Black Caucus, not cracks yet, but it really is a space to watch, and it really is showing sort of the level of angst and anger that Democrats are starting to feel as this continues to go on. Chris?
Yamiche Alcindor, thank you for your reporting. So, Michael, look, I think the thing that's consistent here, whether you listen to the voters, you listen to Joe Trippi, you hear what Yamiche is reporting from the Congressional Black Caucus, there is a cacophony of people who say this has to come to an end. Who is that incumbent on? Is it your old boss, Hakeem Jeffries, and Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi? Who is going to make this come to an end? Or do you have to give Joe Biden his space and his time, which is what our reporting shows they're demanding?
So here's the thing. If I'm Hakeem Jeffries or Chuck Schumer, I have to keep perspective. You still have about 86% of the House Democratic Caucus that still supports the president. You have about 91% of the Senate Democratic Caucus that still supports the president. And those two gentlemen are representing their caucuses, and they continue to support the president for that reason. And so while we see members trickle out, certainly today with the number of House Democrats who've come out against him, we have to keep perspective in that that's 14% of the caucus. You still have 86% supporting him. And so if I'm Joe Biden, I'm staying in for that reason. I also, if I'm Joe Biden, understand that from a money perspective, those donors will come back. And I still have the most important donors, which are the National Finance Committee members that fund my campaign. And so as long as he has their support, he's okay.
So, Joe, the Reverend Al Sharpton said he told the president it was time for a serious calculation of the situation. I want to play exactly what he said.
I'm not pushing for him to step aside. I'm pushing for us to have a very unemotional, clear perspective on how we salvage the progress that has been made in the last 3.5 years and move forward, because we have real danger, which was demonstrated last night by Donald Trump.
So, Joe, whatever Joe Biden decides, and we know he has COVID, right? What makes sense to you in terms of a strategy? Do you gather all the key players together? You say, I am not changing my mind if you decide to stay in, or if he's getting out, is it incumbent on him to call them in and say, here's the plan forward? What is Joe Biden's move in this, do you think?
I think that's it. It's his decision. I mean, everybody on the planet can go to him and make the case. But I think in the end, Joe Biden is going to look at all the facts, look at the polling, look at the voices that are asking him to step aside and those who are urging him to stay. And in the end, Joe Biden, I still believe that woman on the street in Pennsylvania said it. I still believe he will do what he believes is best for the country. That's a big difference from Donald Trump. I mean, if the whole party went to Donald Trump and said, you got to get out, you've been convicted of 34 felonies, you got to do what's best for the country and the party, he would tell them all to go to hell. It wouldn't even be a quick call. So I think with Biden, I'm secure in my belief that he will make the decision, do what's right for the country. I don't think he's going to wait very much longer past the weekend. But if he comes out of there and declares, no, damn it, I'm in, I really do believe that the party will unify behind him. I'm not, and the same, if he came out and said, look, I'm passing the torch, it's time to pass the torch to a new generation of leadership. I've gotten the message. I think that too will unify the party. So we'll see which way it goes. But in the end, it's not up to the speaker, I mean, to Jeffries or Schumer or Nancy Pelosi or any, they can all make their case to them, but in the end, it's Joe Biden's decision. And the good thing about the Democratic Party is we have a leader who will look at the facts and make a decision, not based on what's better for him, but what's best for the party and the country.
Michael, a little different take from a former House Speaker, Kevin McCarthy. Here's what he said about the dynamics between congressional leaders and Joe Biden.
You've got to understand what's going on behind the scenes. Schumer and Hakeem, the minority leader now, are very weak, and they haven't done anything. They just stayed quiet, kind of afraid of the debate. But Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama have been pulling the strings behind the scenes. When Adam Schiff came out yesterday, that was Nancy Pelosi.
Is that a fair assessment about behind-the-scenes maneuvering? And in any case, do you think if there's some truth to that, these delays are hurting the party overall?
Who was that guy? I think, Kevin McCarthy is in no place to give advice on how anyone should lead. And certainly for the good of the party, as Joe just laid out, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Jeffries, and Mr. Biden, Ms. Pelosi are all doing the same thing, which is trying to figure out what's best for the party. I do think that actually at this particular moment, Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer are doing exactly what they should be doing, which is listening to members and communicating those thoughts. Ultimately, 14 million Democrats voted for Joe Biden in the primary to make him our candidate. And as we look forward, he's still doing well in the battleground states. He's still a few points behind Trump nationwide, but he's still close enough and can win this fight. And that's what we should be focused on.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.